Hello everyone and welcome to this devlog video. I'm going to be talking about making the first boss of our game. First I want to talk about my design choices and options I had for making the boss. So when I got the task of making the first boss, I immediately thought of my favorite game franchise, The Legend of Zelda. What they do in their games is make the weak spot look like eyes, even if they are on the back of the boss. So I wanted to do something with eyes too, but designing and making an entire boss was a little too much work because I had only 1 week for the presentation of the first prototype. I decided on making just the eyes for the first prototype and add the rest of the body later. I thought about different ways the eyes could be placed, like should they be a part of a bigger monster or should they be placed against a wall. Eventually, I decided that the eyes should just be floating in the middle of a room. I thought this would make a more fun and challenging fight because you can walk around the boss and you aren't just staring in one direction of the room. The boss consists of just 3 eyes flowing in the middle of a room, and to make the boss feel a little eerie and creepy, each eye looks at you and tracks your position for the entire boss fight. Each eye has its own attack, and when shooting an eye, it closes after a certain amount of hits the eye has taken. After a couple of seconds, another eye will open. This is to make the boss fight last longer, and so you can just kill it in one shot. Another thing I wanted in the boss fight is for smaller enemies to be also in the room to harass you while you are focusing on the boss. This is so you can just shoot one eye when it opens, preventing it to attack. But you must also focus the smaller enemies or they would just pile up and quickly overpower you. To do that, I made one of the eyes attack just spawn a couple of goblins. The other eye shoots lasers, and the last eye charges up a big laser that you can't dodge, so you have to make the eye shut before it can shoot. So now I'm gonna talk about how the code works of the boss. The boss has 2 scripts, a script for the boss itself and a script for each individual eye. Let's just take a look at the eye first. In the start, of course, it basically just gets its parent, its renderer, and searches for the player in its parent. Then I have a slurp for the eye looking at the player, and then I have an if statement for when the eye should be white or when it should be black, basically when it should be open or when it should be shut. Then for a collision detection, it only checks for collision if the eye is active, so it doesn't register any hits when it's not active or when it's closed, so you can just shoot an eye when it's closed. Then it checks for the if it gets hit by a projectile, and if it does, the health of the boss goes down and the amount of hits an eye took goes up, and when a eye took a couple of hits, it will close. This happens in the boss script. And then I have an if statement for when the health gets below 0, the boss will go to state 5, which basically is just its death state. So let's take a look at the boss script. I have a lot of fields and stuff here, structs. So in the start state, the boss gets set to its state 0, which is just its reset state. Then for a for loop, it gets in each eye in its child that are in the child area. It looks for the canvas and the player. Then in the update, the slider gets updated to the boss health, and then it goes into its switch statements, which basically is just its state machine. It checks for the boss state, which is just an int ranging from 1 to 7. 7 is just an empty state that gets called when the boss isn't needed, so it doesn't use any unnecessary processing power. So state 0 is the boss spawns or reset state. Each eye gets set to true, each eye is colored white. All the stuff is set true, like the health slider. Its max health gets reset, and it goes to state 1. State 1, basically the bosses, all the bosses' eyes are shut, and it's just waiting for one of them to open. Then after a couple of seconds, um, the boss will choose a uh, random uh, digit ranging from 2 to 5. 2 to 5 being the states of the boss where the left eye is open, the middle eye, or the right eye. So it basically just chooses which one it should open between those three, and it checks if uh, if the chosen number is the same as the previous eye that has opened. So you don't have a boss fight where only the left eye opens, for instance. So you always have a couple of eyes opening for just to make the boss fight be different every time. Then, of course, it chooses whether it should open the left, the middle, or the right eye. These all are a little bit different because the attacks also get handled in there. So the left eye is the one that just shoots a couple lasers every couple seconds. The eye gets set to active, look speed gets set a little bit higher so that the tracking is a bit better, so it doesn't miss as much. Then it has a timer for how each couple of seconds it will instantiate a bullet at the position of the eye and rotation of the eye. Um, and then, of course, the timer gets set back to 0, so it loops back, does the timer, and then does it every couple of seconds. Um, and then it checks uh, if the amount of eye hits is or above the hits an eye takes, which is I believe is 5. So when a eye gets hit 5 times, it will change the look speed back to its default, set the eye hits back to 0, and go back to the boss state 1, which is the waiting state. So and then after a couple seconds, it chooses another one. So then in the middle eye, this is the one that spawns the goblins. So uh, it does a null check if there are minions in the hierarchy. So it doesn't it doesn't crash if there aren't any minions. Um, and it has a bool whether the minions already spawned, so it doesn't spawn minions every frame. Then a for loop for the amount of minions that get spawned, which I believe is 5. Then, of course, the minions get instantiated at their spawn location. And then, of course, it checks again for the amount of hits the eye has taken. Then for the right eye, this is the one that charges up, becomes red, and then after a couple of seconds shoots the laser that you can't dodge. So again, the eye is set to active. Look speed is set way up, so you know the tracking is better, so the laser will actually hit you. Then it does the charge time, and when the charge timer is still counting up, the color of the eye becomes increasingly red. Excuse me. Then for if the counter is above the certain time, if there hasn't been a laser already instantiated, the laser will instantiate, which basically is just a very long capsule, and the eye will stay red. Then, of course, again, it checks for the amount of eyes or amount of hits it has taken, and if it has taken more hits or equal hits than the amount of hits an eye can take, then the laser gets destroyed and everything is reset and the boss loops back to state 1. Then, as we have seen, or as I have explained before in the ice boss script, the boss will be set to state 5 when it dies. So this is the die state. The that all the child of the eyes get destroyed, so there aren't any lasers or anything left that can kill you. Then it has a little fade animation, so it fades out when you kill it. this is handled for each eye, and then it lerps to uh, to alpha 0, which just fades it. Then after it's done fading, it goes to state 6, and which basically just sets all the components to inactive, um, and then it gets set to state 7, which is just an empty state. And that's about it for the code. Lastly, I want to talk about things that went wrong and improvements I want to make in the future. So a couple things that didn't work were, instead of the charge attack, I wanted the boss to shoot his laser from the left to the right of the room. This didn't really work because the boss is in the center of the room, so you could just walk around. And the only way to avoid it would be to jump over the laser, which is hard to do because it's in virtual reality. For improvements for the boss, there are multiple things I intend to do. First off, after testing the fight, I noticed that the shotgun attachment is able to one-shot any eye. This is because the eye checks for how many hits it has taken before closing. This should be changed to how much damage an eye has taken, and there should also be a cap on how much damage you can do to one eye before it closes to prevent it insta-killing the boss. Another thing I want to improve on is the polish. I want to add sounds for the attacks, add animation, and make the boss just look better. Thank you so much for watching. That was it for the devlog, and I hope to see you in the future when the game comes out.